Greetings, Monstrites. The Underworld movie series have certainly pushed and caringly embellished the notion of vampires and werewolves being at odds. But are these the origins of all the animosity, or does the history stem far beyond our modern pop culture? Exploring this, I will be hunting out the earliest of motion pictures displaying this unfortunate hatred between two wonderful and quite distinguished monsters. I will also be going back into mythology or cryptozoology of old to see if there are any answers there, as well as digging into the possible logic or other factors that have influenced the manifestation of this rivalry. Nothing has brought the quarrel of vampire versus werewolf to public awareness quite like the hypnotic screens of our living rooms. Although before Underworld and Twilight, this theme did indeed come to life in another fashion. Founded in 1991, White Wolf released RPG publications set in the world of darkness, such as Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse. Without getting in too deep in this lore, there exists the Worm, which is one of three powerful godlike spirits in this universe. After an insane bit of history, the Worm became the corruption of all that is known. Under this darkness spawned vicious vampires within whom werewolves could perceive the taint. These vampires, in a sense, being parasites, pests, a perversion of life to the werewolves. The werewolves, created by Gaia, an even greater world spirit, in general hold more power than the vampires, but there are those among this nuisance that could destroy several of the furry protectors of the natural world. Not exactly a rivalry, as they defile the world with their inventions and companies. Vampires avoid werewolves, for many do not even know why they are hunted by them. Nonetheless, the lore here is rich and has been revealed as an inspiration and influence on the more so versus setting of the Underworld franchise. But how about pre-modern media? The 1984 Ghostbusters cartoon had an episode called No One Comes to Lupusville, which was composed upon a great little plot involving a contention between the two monster types. Hell, the episode even ended with answering the question, what would happen if one bit the other? Going further back to 1971, as the title states, the werewolf versus the vampire woman, we have a small feud between the two. And retracting even further brings us to a good old comedy horror, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein of 1948, where Dracula fights the Wolfman. Dracula, of course, played by Bela Lugosi, and the Wolfman by Lon Chaney Jr. Classics. This obviously wasn't the first time these monsters were featured, and not the first time Dracula and a Wolfman appeared on screen together. For 5 years earlier, in The Return of the Vampire, the two made a somewhat partnered appearance where the Wolfman acts as a servant to Dracula, sparking the very first conception of animosity on film as he rebels against the master vampire. This 1943 flick wasn't the first inventor of this sort of relationship between the two, as in Bram Stoker's Dracula novel or written work, the vampire had the power to control animals and to turn into a wolf, or as later seen in the movie, a werewolf. Therefore, the notion of werewolves versus vampires can at best be referenced from here by the wolf being controlled by a vampire and hence developing a disliking to its manipulator. Dracula's ability to shapeshift into a werewolf, though, nicely leads us to the next area of discussion under this topic, within which we shall explore older times before even the first radios and telephones. Vampires, werewolves, and witches were largely seen as the devil's work, each their own and mostly just related by that great horned leader. But beside this, there also existed a belief in Greece and in a surprising amount of other countries that if the corpse of a werewolf sort were not destroyed, it would return in some form of a vampire. It was known as the Brucolacco. Again, this idea was found to be present in France as the Blaise Garve. In Hungary, if a werewolf ate the flesh of a killed person, when it died, it would rise again as a vampire known as a Farkas Goldus. Similar in Belarus, when a traitor witch or werewolf died, it would come back as a vampiric being. We see clear similarities in Russian and German folklore, as well as in southern Slavic regions as the Vudkolak. Slightly less related, the Naoli mystics of Old Mexico were believed to drink blood and have the ability to shapeshift into were creatures. And this repeats in Cajun folklore in the United States in the telling of a similar type of vampiric sorcerer. An interesting corresponding creature to vampires and werewolves is the Alp, that feeds on blood and can shapeshift into a variety of animals. As far as other vampire or werewolf roles, other than killing and feeding, it's possible you might find folklore of werewolves as protectors, but it is rare and brief. Therefore, looking over what is mythology to most, we aren't stricken with any notion of specific loathing between the two monsters, and as with most such mysterious and frightening creatures, the truest answer may be within the human imagination itself. So finally, let's explore the psychology behind this strange yet most fitting of quarrels. From the earliest of mentionings of these dwellers of the night, they are not much more than two different representations of evil. Both may see humans as prey, and both are hated and hunted. Now, both being predators puts them in a spot of competition for a same food source, which is quite a primal answer to the animosity, but not for lore within the modern world. Most of these types of beings are part human after all, and so should be capable of rational thought and strategy. Capable or not, though, it would make sense that a feeling of hierarchy would rise and take its place within their individual societies. If we as humanity still express the ridiculousness of racism among ourselves, as well as many other isms, then I actually wouldn't find it that far-fetched that such monstrous cultures would develop deeper, irrational dislikings for each other and evolve around these shallow beliefs. Beliefs such as vampires are superior and more intellectual, or that werewolves are a more genuine form of life, seeing vampires as unnatural leeches. It is in a way a representative of a feud of worker classes that were more discernible some 80 years ago, where you had physical workers on the bottom and knowledge workers on the top, or of corrupt aristocrats ruling at the top with the wild beastmen trying to regain their rights. This dispute can be speculated as two sides of evil battling within, as is the nature of evil, having no allies. One a more chaotic evil, the other more organized, perhaps fighting for dominance. Or like two political parties, both corrupt and predatory, lost in their perception of what is best. If you enjoy this grim topic, I'd love to shout out Mythologic Art Studio, a 3D modeling / sculpting studio I am very happy to be a part of. I work with simply the best little team of people you could hope to work with, and well, our creations speak for themselves. I know we have a lot of werewolf fans here, and I would feel wrong not to show off this Red Huntress, part of our Grim Hunters series, sculpted by our very own head artisan, Alain Viesca. I find this to be one of the coolest mini sculpts I have ever seen. 3 werewolves and a spicy Red Rider. What else can you ask for? And just you wait for what's in store next in the series. But really, I'm proud of the work we do, and we would totally appreciate it if you checked out our 3D printable models on myminifactory.com under Mythologic Art Studio, link in description. Stay tuned for this model all painted up. Werewolves and vampires aren't quite opposites, but with creative and thought-out storytelling, they are obviously a wonderful palette for building a universe upon because of their similarities and differences. It is in our human nature to separate and classify, and so what our writers have come up with for novels, movies, and games is admirable. Admirable enough that this video had to come into being even though there is no obvious source of this feud, a grudge, believe it or not, that some small subcultures actually believe is absolutely real. I find it fascinating how the notions of who is greater, more intellectual, truer, flips back and forth through the various fictional plots we are presented with. The storytelling can nicely go in any direction with these humanoid monsters, but why even go there? These are two fine creatures of the night, and rather than spend more time contemplating this subject, I suggest you go watch The Monster Squad, where these two and other notable monsters work together, as I think best they should. Feel welcome to share your insight on the topic. I have been Monster Master Arthur. Be wary walking the streets at night. Oh no, not because of these two, but because of the people, humans, that regard this whole epic rivalry as being real. And they're out there.